Welcome to week 6 of On Top the Cage. I'm going to refer to this as the redo show. To my left is not Dan. Anyway, we shot the show last night. Almost 57 minutes of show. And due to a lot of different circumstances, all of it hit the cutting room floor. We had a guest picker. It was a disaster almost from the beginning to the end. There were certainly a couple of edits that were mandated, so none of us lost our jobs. But as I was going through it and looking back at it again this morning, I decided there's no way that we can post that show. So I apologize out of the gate for that. I will miss my buddy Dan. It is Wednesday night, so in any event, we're going to, by the way, we mentioned that last night, we're going to be shooting the show on Wednesday going forward as Dan's youth football team bowed out of its season. He gets a bonus game, I think, this upcoming week, but they did not make the playoffs. Dan, is that correct? Dan doesn't want to talk about it. All right, very good. Fall temps arrived here over the weekend. The heaters are out. It was a little bit different setting up the set outside of what you see. My straw man here. So everything kind of slides over this way a little bit in the garage. In any event, we had a pretty good weekend. I guess the highlight of the weekend was Dan's youth football team that I just referenced a little bit earlier. Dan and I always text, and we were texting on Friday night, and he said, it's cowboy hat theme night because we got big noon kickoff, some play on Coach Prime. And I thought this was a thing, but apparently it was just a Dan thing. So anyway, I obliged. He asked me to go out to the game. I went. I get out of the car. There's a bunch of people there. Nobody's fucking wearing a cowboy hat besides me. So, in any event, that was a little bit of a mess. But anyway, Dan was laughing. He sent over the neighborhood kid, Dominic. He's like 9 years old, right? And he comes up to me, and the first thing he says to me, he goes, nice hat. And he's 9, right? So, I don't know if he's like being serious because he's 9 and he likes the hat, or if he's like being a dick. I didn't know how to take it. I kind of look at him sideways like, you little motherfucker, you know? Anyway, so all that happened. This show is going to be considerably shorter. Obviously, we don't have Dan's commentary here, but I wanted to put something out. I went back and forth today in regards to whether or not anything was gonna be put up this week, but I didn't think it was fair to the people who like to watch the show on a regular basis. So I'm here. Behind the scene is my son Keaton. He's taking a picture right now. He's distracting me a little bit, but I mentioned that last night as well. I'm looking forward to all the kids being back. It's midterm week for the college students. I know Dan mentioned that his son Tyler was coming back from OU, Connor Keaton from Ohio State. So looking forward to having them all here. Now, I'm sure there was quite a bit of a few other things that happened. I know that our guest picker was gifted his asshole coin. I don't have it on the set right now. I have my own back there from previous guest picker on the show, Mark the Mechanic. It was a very nice present. In any event, Dan texted me and said, please mention that. So in any event, it's on the show, Dan. And the staple of the show, the beer review. Dan, your portion of the show. Dan doesn't want to talk about it. All right, very good. I tell you what, last night, probably the highlight of the show was the beer review. I picked the beer, kind of for Dan. Dan likes sour beers. It's a Ghost. I called it a Ghost last night. Our guest picker, which you will see none of, because I completely scrapped it. I deleted the whole thing. Back and forth today. Pissed off. Anyway, he was correcting me and saying it was Gose. I looked it up today in regards to pronunciation. We were both wrong. It's Gosa pronunciation. But in any event, the beer review was Caramel Apple Surprise by my favorite local brewery here in Akron called Arche. It's a heavy beer, a tick above our wheelhouse. It's 10% by alcohol. Dan was first in last night among the three of us. He absolutely loved it. It certainly was the highlight of the show. There was a debate during the beer review because it is Caramel Apple Surprise. What's the difference between caramel and caramel? I guess that's one of the good things about reshooting the show. I looked that up too. Caramel is just us North Americans changing things. It's not a thing. Caramel is the actual word, term. Caramel is not a word. So, in any event, it was great. Dan had 2 on set, but he was perfectly fine. That's how much he liked it. But it was a great time. Hey, it is a staple of the show. I pulled one out of the IPAs that I have here. It's from the same brewery company. It's called Hop Getaway Campfire Edition. Man, my eyes are bad, and that's why Dan does this portion of the show. It is a double India Pale Ale. It is 8% by alcohol volume. Cool little presentation. These hop guys are around a campfire. I think they got some marshmallows, some s'mores, or something going on. Anyway, this is very awkward. I'm going to do this by myself. Ooh, dark presentation in regards to the color of the beer. Very amberish, I guess. See if I can get it all in here with my pour. I think the pour is good. All right, there it is. Double beer review this week. Anyway, tasty. I like it. I don't mind it. I'll tell you what, the beer last night was like urine colored. It wasn't near this dark, but it was tremendous. In any event, last week results. Dan went 7-7. He has a really good record on the season. 42-35-1. Good job, Dan. He also hit his elephant pick. The New York Jets was his elephant pick. They went from being called the paper airplanes to elephant pick for Dan. I keep looking at him like he's going to look back at me and respond. I'm going to have to get over that. In any event, I had a very good week. I told you it was going to be a bounce back week for myself. I agree. 9-5. I'm 41-36-1 on the season. That's +5. I also hit my elephant pick. I'm looking at Dan again. Kansas City Chiefs, they finally covered a game. I liked them in Minnesota. They found a way to win that game by 7. I want to say the line was 4.5, something like that. Just over the number. So Dan and I both very good records on the season. And as this show goes, without some back and forth banter, I think we're on to football. All right, very good. Thursday Night Football starts with division game. The Denver Broncos play the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City 10.5-point favorites in this game. Denver 1-4 on the season. Kansas City sports the opposite record of 4-1. Denver comes off of their home loss against the New York Jets. Tell you what, that defense is just horrible. I mean, it's horrible. I don't know. And they lost that in the Nathaniel Hackett revenge game. The whole thing in the offseason with Sean Payton throwing him under the bus. I think it meant a lot to the Jets. Good for them to come out of there with a win. There's not a whole lot to say about Denver. Kansas City, I thought Kelsey was down for the season. He went down just before halftime in that game in Minnesota that they won, that I just previously mentioned. We were talking about the elephant picks. It was, like I said, it was non-contact. I thought it was an Achilles. I thought he was done for the year. I started texting my fantasy football playing friends. I'm like, pick up Noah Gray. Pick up Noah Gray. He's the backup tight end for Kansas City. Kelsey came back in that game. They still kind of seem to be sputtering on offense to me a little bit. I think they need one of their wide receivers to step up. And whether or not that's going to be Kadarius Toney or Rashee Rice or Sky Moore, they need somebody to step up and be the main target. Rashee Rice has caught the most balls for them so far this year. Minus 10.5 in this game. I replayed the show back enough times. I know Dan and I's picks. Dan and I both were on Kansas City minus 10.5 in this game. The Sunday slate again starts very early in London, 9:30 in the morning. It is the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, Dan Ratbird, you got it. Playing the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee is designated as the home team in London. Baltimore 3-2 on the season. Tennessee is 2-3. Baltimore 3.5-point favorites in this game. I'm guessing this line's climbing. I bet it gets to 4.5, something like that number. Baltimore, they come off a bad division loss. A big division loss, I guess is a better way to put it, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They got the opening touchdown. They kind of had control of the game, and then they didn't. The receivers couldn't catch the ball. I think there was 7 drop passes in that game for the Ravens. Tennessee comes off of their loss in Indianapolis. The whole thing, Dan and I talk about it every week. They couldn't get Derrick Henry going, and when they can't get Derrick Henry going, things don't go well for them. I want to say he had 43 yards. Their defense, which is kind of their calling card at Tennessee, wasn't great in Indianapolis. Gardner Minshew, he came in that game later, and we'll talk about that injury to Anthony Richardson when the Colts come up on the board. Baltimore minus 3.5 in this game. Dan and I both chose the Ravens, or Ratbirds as he would like us to say. The Sunday 1 p.m. slate starts with the Washington Commanders traveling to play the Atlanta Falcons. Last night, our co-host was very excited about that, although that was where the very first mandatory edit had to take place in the show. There were probably more, but that one was certainly a doozy of one. You guys will never see it, I promise you. It's still on my mind. Like, literally, I played the show back twice. I played it back last night when I was fairly intoxicated. I'm like, yeah, we can edit. It's going to be okay. I played it back in the morning, and I'm like, hell no, we'll fucking lose our jobs if this thing shows. So, in any event, this show is brash. You know, it's in your face. It's beer drinking, football talking, and it was more than that last night, and I apologize. Washington, 2.5 point, or I'm sorry, Atlanta is the 2.5 point favorite in this game. Washington comes off a really bad loss to my Chicago Bears. I don't think I'm going to stop being able to look over to my left to fake Dan, if you will. But they lost to Chicago on Thursday, so I had plenty of rest. They got blown out by my Chicago Bears. I'm wearing my colors. I'm super excited about it. It doesn't take much for the Bears to do. Something I'm like, they're back, type of thing. I don't know if they are, but we'll talk about them when they come up on the board. But I don't know where that, I'm looking that way. I don't know where that Washington defense was. I mean, it's pretty damn good. They got Deron Payne in the middle. They got Montez Sweat. They got Chase Young. But for the Bears to put up a 40-burger on, that's a really disappointing defensive performance for them. Atlanta comes off a big win at home against the Houston Texans. That game went back and forth. Houston had to lead. Atlanta had to lead. Houston got it back. Atlanta got a game-winning field goal as time expired. Good for Desmond Ridder, though. I mean, he had a little bit more time to throw, and he came up big on the last drive. I think they got the ball with like a minute and a half left. He got him in field goal range. Their field goal kicker banged it through. They won the football game. Recapping, Atlanta minus 2.5 in this game. Dan and I both chose the Washington Commanders. Next game on the board, mentioned it earlier, my Chicago Bears, but it's the Minnesota Vikings in division traveling to Soldier Field to play the Chicago Bears. Minnesota's been installed as 2.5 point favorites in this game. They are they're not. They're 1-4 on the season. Same record as the Bears, 1-4. Minnesota, I mentioned them earlier. They come off their home loss against Kansas City. They're very game. They were in the game. The biggest thing with Minnesota has been they've turned the ball over. I think they lead the National Football League in turnovers. They did it again. Their first play, they got the ball. First play from scrimmage was a pass. Receiver caught it, and then he got stripped. They turned the ball immediately over to Kansas City. When you lose a turnover battle in the National Football League, like 85, 90% of the time, you lose the football game. My Chicago Bears, I mentioned them earlier, 1-4 on the season. With that being said, they got their first win, a big win in the nation's capital. Justin Fields stacked 2 really good games in a row. Like, I'm excited about it. I'm like, Bears are back. We're got a chance for a wild card. It doesn't take much to appease me in regards to this football team. We have this love-hate relationship, which is 99% love, and 1% of the time I want to absolutely kill them. In any event, maybe I'm too vested, but the offense has looked pretty good the last 2 weeks. Defense was a little bit better. They got a little bit more pressure on the quarterback. They get their secondary back. Dan, what do you say? Dan loves the Chicago Football Bears. He's picked them every time this year. I'm with him. I'm riding with Dan. We're both on the Bears, getting home points, getting 2.5 points at home. All right, next game on the board is the Seattle Seahawks traveling to Cincinnati. I think this is a pretty good game, Dan. This is becoming amusing for me. Cincinnati is a 2.5 point favorite in this game. Our third 2.5 point favorite line that we have on the board. But Cincinnati, 2.5 point favorites at home against Seattle. Seattle off bye, so they got some time to prepare for this. They are 3-1 on the season. They're a pretty good football team. Last time we saw them play was on Monday night a couple of weeks ago, where they kind of dismantled the New York Giants. A lot of people have done that this year. But, they're not a bad football team. Their defense will get tested this week. I think it's probably the best part of their team. Because Cincinnati, they come off a win out in the desert against Arizona, where Joe Burrow looked considerably different than he has in previous weeks. There was more mobility. He got out of the pocket a little bit, so I guess that calf injury is healing. Good for them because they need it. Jamar Chase made a big scene of things like, I'm always effing open. This past week, he was always effing open in this game. He caught a ton of balls. I want to say he scored 3 touchdowns for the fantasy players. So they look like a better team, and Burrow certainly looked healthier. Oh, this game right here. Dan, I'll go first. I'm going to lay it. The line's short enough for me with Cincinnati minus 2.5. Dan went with me as well. There was a theme. Dan and I picked a lot of the games early together. and then we have some disagreements at the end, but I'll let you know how those shake out. So Dan and I are in agreement on the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games of the slate. Next game on the board is San Francisco 49ers travel to play Dan's Cleveland Football Browns. San Francisco 6-point favorite in this game. They are 3-1. Oh, Jesus, I keep on reading higher. They're 5-0. They're one of the undefeated football teams in the National Football League, along with the Philadelphia Eagles. Dan, this is the best team in the National Football League. It really is. I mean, they have playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. It starts with Christian McCaffrey. Brock Purdy has proven himself as a legit National Football League quarterback. And then you got Deebo Samuel, and you got Brandon Ayuk, who's really blossoming as potentially a number 1 wide receiver, and George Kittle. I mean, what's not to like about that offensive arsenal? And then that defense, led by Nick Bosa. There's not a weakness on any of the levels. I mean, you put Fred Warner, a linebacker, a great linebacker, and then that secondary. I mean, that team is stacked, top to bottom. I think they're the class of the National Football League. I don't think it's questionable right now. I know we're still early in the season. The Cleveland Browns, they're 2-2 on the season. They're off by, so they have plenty of time. And obviously the big situation is with Deshaun Watson. And I know Dan and I went back and forth about this stuff, about why is there so much drama around your fucking football team all the time? And there's drama again. And it started because Deshaun Watson was medically cleared to play, and then he said he can't play. And Dan and I had a big debate last night in regards to, nobody knows their body better than themselves. And if he says he can't play, he can't play. But here we go again. And we're, 2 weeks later, and he hasn't practiced. So I don't know what's going on with that situation. I don't know if he's going to play. Dan and I were both guarding against that. Dan and I both took the San Francisco 49ers -6 in Cleveland. I know it hurt Dan a little bit to do it, but he 100% did not sway one bit. He was going there from the gate. Next game on the board, the New Orleans Saints travel to Houston. New Orleans 3-2 on the season. The Houston Texans are 2-3 on the season. New Orleans is a 1.5-point favorite on the road. They come off an absolute beatdown of the New England Patriots in Foxborough last Sunday. I want to say it was 34-0. Defense obviously pitched a shutout. Alvin Kamara was more involved. And then we got Houston. We mentioned them a little bit earlier against their loss, their back-and-forth loss in Atlanta at the buzzer. But C.J. Stroud continues to play well, Dan. Dan, let's say, he was chirping on C.J. Stroud and how impressed he was with Stroud. I get it. I mean, he shattered the record for most passes thrown by a rookie quarterback without throwing an interception. We're well past the half or quarter pole of the season. He hasn't thrown a pick yet. New Orleans -1.5 in this game. Dan and I both chose Houston. I think it's risky. I said my personal money would not be on this game. It's not going to be. It could go either way. I have no idea about this game, but very good. Dan and I are both on the Houston Texans -1.5. Next game on the board, AFC South. The Indianapolis Colts travel to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. First place on the line in the AFC South. This game, both these teams are 3-2. Jacksonville installed as 4-point favorites in this game. Indianapolis, we talked about them briefly earlier when Tennessee was on the board. They come off of their home win against Tennessee. The big news out of that game, though, was Anthony Richardson injured his AC joint. Dan was giving me, some medical stuff, and then the diagnosis, and the layman's term, it's a separated shoulder, and it's a good, at a minimum, 4-week injury. This is certainly Gardner Minshew's team in Indianapolis going forward. Probably 4, 6, who knows? 8 weeks, I don't know. It's going to be a hot minute, but I've expressed my affinity for Gardner Minshew in the past and said I think he can start for a good handful of National Football League teams. And he started in Jacksonville, which makes this kind of fun too. He came to prominence there out of kind of nowhere. In any event, that's Indianapolis. Jacksonville came off a extremely impressive win in London. They won back-to-back games in London. They stayed there. They won both of them, and they beat the Buffalo Bills. This team looks so much more like that playoff team all of a sudden from last year. They came out of the gates kind of slow, and they didn't look like that team. Now they do. They're really rounding into form. Their defense is really coming around as well. That team has played the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills this year so far, and they've held both of them to 20 points or less. I like the offense. I mean, I think, Trevor Lawrence is a very good quarterback. Travis Etienne, Calvin Ridley. They got some weapons over there as well. Zay Jones, they drafted. Christian Kirk. They got some players. Jacksonville -4 in this game, Dan. Dan and I are both on Jacksonville in this game. This is wildly awkward. Dan and I are in agreement on the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 games. Next game on the board. It is the Carolina Panthers traveling to play the in-laws team, the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are almost 2 touchdown favorites in this game, -13.5. Carolina is winless on the season. They are 0-5. The Miami Dolphins are 4-1. Carolina comes off a road loss in Detroit. They were never really in the game. Detroit's a very good team. I'm going to talk about them in a bit. With that being said, they're taking more rookie lumps, with Bryce Young, and the offensive line isn't very good, and they're devoid of playmakers, to jump up to the number 1 pick and draft Bryce Young. They gave up a huge bounty, and part of that bounty was DJ Moore, the star receiver for the Chicago Bears. It really hurts that Bryce Young doesn't have a very good offensive line. He doesn't have very good weapons to throw through. So, it's going to be a tough season for them throughout. I appreciate that since the Bears have their number 1 pick this year. I hope they go winless. But I'm done talking about a really lousy football team in Carolina. Let's talk about a really, really good football team in the Miami Dolphins. Once again, recapping, almost 2 touchdown favorites, 13.5-point favorites. They come off a win against the New York Giants, and I don't know who made the schedule. The NFL made the schedule, obviously. But damn, Denver, the New York Giants, and now the Carolina Panthers come to town. That is the softest fucking schedule, 3-game stretch I've seen in a National Football League, and I don't know, forever. It does get considerably more difficult going forward, but good for them. I mean, they're missing Jalen Ramsey, I know that. But let's talk about this team, and they got like a budding star. They didn't come out of this game unscathed, though. I mean, they blew out the Giants. They have a historically great offense. The defense kind of coming around. I think Vic Fangio's got them playing a little bit better. But they didn't come out unscathed, like I mentioned. Their rookie, Devon Achane, I think is the correct pronunciation. I thought it was Achane. I think it's Achane. I think he came out and said that this week. He has a knee injury. It's at a minimum, I think, 4 weeks. I think he may have went on the IR today. So that hurts a little bit, but, this team is not hurting for playmakers. Let's start with Tyreek Hill. Well, let's start with Jalen Waddle. Let's go to Jalen Waddle. Let's go to Raheem Mostert. They got players. They had Chase Claypool for, a couple of urinal minutes from the Chicago Bears. It kind of outwards welcome. I keep on telling the in-laws that cat can play football if he can get his head straight. He's like Adonis. The guy's like 6'4", runs a 4.4. He's an edgy football player. I would love to see them get him involved. I think that would be great for that football team. Maybe it happens. Dan and I were both willing to lay the huge number. I have no problems laying this big a number, even in the National Football League, because that's how easily the Miami Dolphins score the ball and how bad the Carolina Panthers are. Next game on the board, the mentor-mentee game, and it starts our Sunday 4 p.m. slate, is the New England Patriots traveling to Sin City to play the Vegas Raiders. Raiders 3-point favorites in this game. New England's 1-4 on the season. The Vegas Raiders are 2-3. New England, we come off a horrible home loss, a shutout loss. They lost 34-0 in the last 2 games. Dallas and New Orleans that New England has played. They've been outscored 72-3. Bill Belichick's 2 worst losses as a head coach. And Dan and I debated last night, any chance Bill Belichick gets fired mid-season? And we both came to kind of the same conclusion. No way in hell Robert Kraft does that. It's too much respect for him. Do I think Bill Belichick's the head coach of the New England Patriots next year? Probably not. And Dan had mentioned in a previous show, and I confirmed it, Belichick's basically the de facto general manager there too. So, this is all on him. It's not, he's buying the groceries and cooking the meals there. He's not just cooking the meals, he's buying the groceries as well. So a lot of it falls on him. That's the way things go. Dan and I both went with the Vegas Raiders, who came off a big win on Monday night against the Green Bay Packers. Max Crosby was the beast that he always is. Very questionable decision by Josh McDaniels to kick a field goal that banged off the right upright. I thought they should have went for it to try to end the game. Anyway, these are 2 coaches that are squarely in the crosshairs in regards to, are you going to be employed come, this time next year? Any event, Dan and I both chose the Vegas Raiders at -3. Next game on the board. And finally, when Dan and I started having a little bit more debate about who's really going to win these football games, because we were on the same page a lot. Hopefully we have a great week. But it is an old division rival game. Not anymore. And it is Detroit traveling to Tampa Bay. Back in the day, it used to be Detroit, Minnesota, Chicago, and Tampa Bay in a division. Not anymore. Tampa Bay is in the NFC South now. In any event, and Green Bay, did I miss them? I guess there must have been 5 teams in their division way back in the day before all the realignment thing happened. Detroit's field goal favorite on the road in Tampa Bay. We mentioned them. They beat down Carolina, and it was minus their star receiver, Aaron St. Brown, their playmaker complimentary piece, running back Jahmyr Gibbs. He was not on the field last week. They didn't need him. This team, the National Football League thought a lot of this team start the season because they put them on the opening Thursday night football game. I believe now. I think this team's absolutely legit. San Francisco certainly is a class of the NFC, but I think there's a significant debate whether the second best team is Detroit or Philadelphia. This team can play on both sides of the ball. Aiden Hutchinson is becoming an absolute star in the National Football League. They've taken on the personality of their very edgy head coach. I had that very quotable line again, about being the hunted. And he's like, we're not the hunted. We're on your fucking front porch. We're ready, type of thing. So they go to Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay's off by. So they got plenty of time to prepare for this. They're one of the surprise teams in the National Football League. They're 3-1 on the year. Like I said, surprise teams, 2 weeks to prepare. The biggest thing about this game, Dan, the creamsicle uniforms come out. I let Dan know that. He was very giddy about it. It's the reason why we went in different directions on this game. He's like, holy shit, the creamsicle uniforms are back. I'm on the Buccaneers. I'm not. I took the Lions. It is the first game that Dan and I were at odds last night on the reshoot of this show. So there you go. There you have it. Next game on the board is the Arizona Cardinals playing the Los Angeles Rams. Division game. Arizona 1-4. The Rams are 2-3. The Rams are 6.5-point favorites in this game. Arizona comes off their home loss against Cincinnati. It was the first game kind of that Josh Dobbs didn't look as good as he had previously. He looked like a very good game manager. And then second of all, they lost James Conner, their starting running back. That can't help their situation. I don't think Kyler Murray plays football at all for the Arizona Cardinals again. He's on the second, IR list, injury reserve list, which means I don't think he can play until after week 8. If I'm not mistaken. In the event, the Rams, they were game. They come off a tough loss against Philadelphia. Philadelphia did cover that number, by the way. But they were certainly in the first half. They competed. Cooper Kupp was back for the first time. He caught a lot of balls. Puka Nacua continues to do his thing as a wide receiver. They traded Dan Brooks, some news like fucking Adam Schefter on the show last night. He's like, the Rams don't need Van Jefferson, wide receiver anymore. Traded him to the Atlanta Falcons. Once again, very similar trade like the Chase Claypool trade where you get like a couple of urinal mints back, just get him the fuck out of our locker room type thing. And in the event, Rams minus 6.5 in this game. I chose Arizona. Dan went the other way. He likes what the Rams are doing. He put them in, I think, the top 5 of the NFC teams at least. I don't know if I agree with that, but we'll see. We'll see if they back it up again this week. Second game in a row, Dan and I were at odds. I'm on the Arizona Cardinals, getting a 6.5. Dan's laying the wood to 6.5 with the Los Angeles Rams. Next game on the board, the all-green game. It is the Philadelphia Eagles playing the New York Jets. Philadelphia to the Meadowlands, probably about an hour and a half by car. Philadelphia, undefeated football team. I botched that earlier, I think, or maybe it was San Francisco that I botched as a 5-0 football team. Anyway, they've been installed as 6.5-point favorites in this game over the Jets. The Jets are 2-3 on the season, by the way. Philadelphia comes off of their win. I just mentioned it against the Los Angeles Rams. They continue to be steady, but they don't really look like that football team to me that was last year, which was just blowing people out kind of, or overmatching everybody. They kind of seem to be playing to their level of competition a little bit. They don't quite look like the football team, but there's plenty of time left in the National Football League for them to round into what that team was last year. The Jets, they come off a big win. I mentioned it in the opening game, the Nathaniel Hackett Revenge Bowl. And remember the Jets, the week before, Zach Wilson out of nowhere looked like a very competent quarterback, like wildly impressed. He had a so-so game, but they relied on their running game and their very good defense. Their defense came up big. They got a safety, they got a defensive touchdown. And on the opposite side of the ball, I think Breece Hall's a stud running back. They leaned on him heavy. He produced. He scored a touchdown. He ran for over 100 yards. So I think that's kind of the formula for the Jets. Get into like shorter, more manageable situations for Zach Wilson and build his confidence. And who knows, because that team has a very good defense. I kept talking about them. Dan's like, no fucking way. Philadelphia. He's laying it. It was short enough for him. I went the other way. I went with the Jets. I took the 6.5 points. I know it's dangerous. I think the team's competitive. I love their defense. So 3 games in a row, Dan and I were at odds. Next game on the board, and we were on the Sunday Night Football. I know the show's quick. That's good. There's not a whole lot of back and forth between Dan and I. He's a little bit tired, I guess, this evening. In any event, Sunday Night Football is the New York Giants playing the Buffalo Bills. Western New York, Eastern New York, I guess. I understand that they play in New Jersey. In any event, Buffalo, monster favorites, 2 touchdown favorites in this game, minus 14. They are 3-2 on the season. The Giants are 1-4 on the season. And I remember talking about this last night. When does flexing start? When does flexing of the football game start? Because this is an awful football game. I understand the television makers. I get it. The Giants were a playoff team last year. They're nowhere close to that. As far as the Giants go, went nowhere through my beer because I'm talking the whole time. Makes sense, though. Giants, the biggest news, Daniel Jones' injury is a neck injury, I think it is. Tyrod Taylor finished that game. I have no idea who's going to start that game, but it really, to me, it doesn't matter. What matters is if 26 plays, because that offense goes nowhere unless 26 plays. That's Saquon Barkley. Everything went through him. And, you know, I think they're a mess of a football team. They obviously got destroyed last week in Miami. Buffalo, I watched their entire game over in London last week against Jacksonville, and I had personally played them. I was pissed. I don't know if it was the travel or what it was. They committed so many penalties in that game. They looked completely off. Josh Allen looked off. They just, and the defensive injuries are piling up for that football team. They lost their starting linebacker, Matt Milano, as well. Tre'Davious White, their star cornerback, had went out earlier. They're really banged up on the defensive side of the ball, but Dan and I didn't give a shit. We both laid to 14 in this game. Gladly laid to 14 until the Giants show me some sort of signs of life on offense. I don't see how they don't blow this game out. The Buffalo Bills don't. Monday Night Football. Kind of a fun game if you ask me. It's the Dallas Cowboys traveling out to the West Coast to play the Los Angeles Chargers. Dallas is 3-2 on the season. Chargers are 2-2 on the season. Dallas is a 2-point favorite in this game, and they come off an absolute ass-kicking beatdown against the San Francisco 49ers. I think this is a fake team. I do. I'm looking at Dan because I remember having this exact conversation last night. On paper, they look damn good. But when they get on the actual football field, you don't see the results. There was one of the old talking heads that, mentioned that Dak Prescott sucks at quarterback. Look, man, I don't disagree. I think he sucks too. I mean, I think he's an average quarterback at best in the National Football League. But this is the game where, it's offense versus defense, because Dallas' defense is real. There's no two ways about it. And the Chargers bring a pretty good offensive game to the table here. They come off bye, so they got 2 weeks to prepare, and I refer to it as the Kellen Moore Bowl. Kellen Moore is the former offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. Mike McCarthy, who I can't stand, they fire Kellen Moore and give Mike McCarthy the play calling duties. I thought McCarthy sucked as a play caller when he was in Green Bay. Kellen Moore, he's going to be ready for this game, and it's a revenge game for him. Dan loved that shit. He was all over it. We'll see. Herbert will be challenged, but they're a good offensive football team. We both took the Chargers -2 in this game. On buys were the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Elephant picks went really quick. Dan was ready. He loved the idea of the Kellen Moore revenge. He took the Chargers getting 2 points at home against the Dallas Cowboys as his elephant pick. I chose the first game on Sunday, the 9:30 a.m. game in London. I took the Baltimore Ravens as my elephant pick at -3.5. That has been your truncated show for this week. I'm sorry. I can't apologize enough for what happened last night. I'm still fuming a little bit about it. But it was a situation where I wasn't comfortable putting that product out for any of us that were involved. We'll do better. We'll be better for you. I greatly appreciate everybody who's watched, listened. Dan will be more lively next week, I promise. Thank you.